Pentecost has a rich history that goes back farther than the time when the Spirit was poured out on the disciples in the upper room. We fully understand the day of Pentecost when we understand the Old Testament Feast of Pentecost. The word Pentecost is a Greek word meaning the 50th. 50 referring to the number of days counted after Passover. We see the Lord's command in Leviticus 23:16. Quote, "Count off 50 days up to the day after the seventh Sabbath, and then present an offering of new grain to the Lord." The Hebrew word for this festival is Shavuot. The word Shavuot means weeks. It marks the completion of the 7-week counting period between Passover and Shavuot. And Shavuot was the reason that these disciples were gathered in the upper room at this time. When we learn a little bit of history about the feast, we find many rich symbols, and that helps us to understand God's plan for his people. The Old Testament feasts were not only commemorations for events that had happened in the past, but they're also prophetic dress rehearsals for events that will ultimately be fulfilled by Jesus. I will give you a quick example of this. Passover was celebrated to commemorate Israel's deliverance from Egypt and from death. When God saw the blood of the lamb on a home's doorpost, the angel of death would pass over that house, and those inside would be saved from death. Now, Jesus ultimately fulfilled the feast of Passover by being our Passover lamb. And when God sees Jesus' blood, we likewise are saved from death. Jesus has already fulfilled many of the feasts, including Shavuot. Shavuot is also the day that God gave Moses and the Israelites the Torah, the Ten Commandments. Jewish sages have also compared that day to a wedding between God and the Jewish people. The irony is incredible. Let's first take a look at the giving of the law. Did you know that on the very day that the law was given on Mount Sinai, 3,000 people were slain for their sins? On that day of Pentecost, when Peter preached the good news of God's grace and love, 3,000 were saved. Numbers in the Bible are given for very good reason. I said before that the Jewish sages had compared this day to a wedding between God and Israel. On the day of Pentecost, in the book of Acts, the Holy Spirit is given, and that is the day that the ecclesia, or the church, was born. And the church is the bride of Christ, and the Holy Spirit is the promise of the marriage to come.
I will rise when he calls my name.